Hello, Night Seekers, and welcome to Lacuna Noir. This is where forgotten stories and gentle voices meet, carrying you softly into peaceful sleep, wrapped in mystery. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know. And a little note before we begin. You may notice a few brief ads in the first 10 minutes, but after that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the stories. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the night carry you. If you're drawn to these quiet, shadowed nights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story when darkness calls. A few months ago, I received an email at 3 in the morning. The subject line said, Life Rights Inquiry, Untitled Project. I almost deleted it without opening it. At that hour, everything looks like spam. I had been awake because I could not sleep, lying in bed with my phone held above my face while the room around me stayed dark. I had work in a few hours, but my mind would not slow down. The sender's name was Wes Bennett. He introduced himself as a documentary producer. He said he had spent the past year developing a story about me and wanted to discuss the possibility of buying my life rights. I read the email twice. Then I searched his name. He was real. He had produced 2 documentaries I recognized. They were the kind of films people described as important. One had been nominated for several awards. The other had been praised by critics for its careful treatment of a difficult subject. There were photographs of Wes at film festivals, standing beside actors, journalists, and people whose names I knew. He wore dark suits and had the same calm smile in every picture. That only made the email stranger. There was nothing special about my life. I was 32 years old. I worked in an office. I rented a small apartment. I had never been arrested, survived a disaster, escaped a cult, or uncovered a government secret. My childhood had been ordinary. My parents were ordinary. My job was boring enough that I sometimes forgot what I had done by the time I got home. I could not imagine what story anyone could be developing about me. The email did not explain. Wes only said he believed my experience could become a powerful documentary and that he wanted to make sure my side of the story was handled fairly. He ended the message by naming a coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment. Then he gave me a time. Thursday, 10 a.m. He did not ask whether I was available. He wrote as though the meeting had already been arranged. I should have ignored it. Instead, I went. Wes was already sitting near the back when I arrived. The coffee shop was quiet. A few people worked on laptops near the windows. Soft music played from speakers above the counter. Wes looked exactly like his photographs. He appeared to be in his late 40s, with silver beginning to show in his dark hair. He wore a navy jacket over a white shirt. His face was friendly without being warm. A latte sat on the table across from him. It had an extra shot of espresso. There was a light layer of cinnamon on top. That was exactly how I ordered it. I stopped beside the chair. How did you know? I asked. He looked at the cup, then smiled. Research. He said it like a joke. I laughed because I did not know what else to do. A brown leather folder sat beneath one of his hands. He rested his palm on it, as though the folder might slide away if he let go. Please, he said, sit. I sat across from him. He thanked me for coming. He said he understood that his message had probably seemed unusual. That's one word for it, I said. He smiled. There was something easy about him. He knew how to make silence feel comfortable. He did not rush through questions or make me feel examined. At first, the conversation was almost flattering. He asked about my childhood. He knew the street where I had grown up. He knew the name of my elementary school. He knew my father had left when I was 11 and that my mother had raised me alone after that. He asked about my first job. He asked why I had dropped out of college after 1 year. He knew the name of the hospital where I had been born. I answered because most of the information was not secret. It could probably be found online through public records or old social media accounts. Still, it was uncomfortable hearing my life spoken back to me by a stranger. Wes made it feel normal. He told stories about previous documentaries. He described people who had refused to speak to him at first, but later became grateful that they had participated. He said everyone deserved to be understood. I remember relaxing. I even laughed at something he said about a director we both disliked. That was his gift. Wes had a kind of charm you did not notice until it had already closed around you. Then he mentioned the third act. The words came naturally, as if we had already discussed the first two. He said the first act would cover my childhood and early adult life. The second would focus on isolation, my move to the city, and the way I had slowly become harder for friends and family to reach. Then he leaned back and said, "The third act is where things become more difficult." I stared at him. What things? He opened his mouth and paused as though choosing his words carefully. You begin pulling away. From who? Everyone. I already live alone. It becomes more serious than that. I stopped smiling. Wes continued in the same calm voice. He said I would stop answering calls. I would miss work. My mother would become worried because several days would pass without hearing from me. He said my front door one night would not be locked the way I had left it. There would be no broken window, no damage to the door, no sign of forced entry. I remember looking toward the coffee shop entrance. It was bright outside. People walked past the windows. Everything around us looked completely normal. I turned back to him. What kind of documentary is this? True crime, he said. He said it as though I had missed something obvious. I laughed. The alternative was worse. Whose crime? Wes looked at me the way someone looks at a child who has asked a foolish question. Then he opened the leather folder. He did it slowly, almost without thinking. Inside were photographs. The first showed my apartment building from across the street. The next showed the entrance, then the hallway outside my apartment, then my front door. I recognized the small scratch beside the lock. I recognized the faded number attached to the wood. The final photograph had been taken from inside my apartment. The camera was looking out through my open front door. I could see part of my living room wall on one side of the image and the hallway outside on the other. That angle was impossible unless the photographer had been standing inside my home. My chair screeched across the floor. I did not realize I had stood up until several people looked over. Wes calmly closed the folder. How did you get that? I asked. He did not answer immediately. My heart was beating too quickly. I looked around the coffee shop again, but no one seemed to be watching us now. We already have most of the footage, he said. What footage? I just wanted you to know that your side gets told too. He placed both hands on the folder. It seemed like the ethical thing to do. I left without touching the coffee. Wes did not follow me. That night, I blocked his number. I blocked his email address. I found the production company's main line and blocked that too. Then I changed the passwords on my email, social media, bank account, and building security app. I checked every room in my apartment. I looked inside the closets, beneath the bed, behind the shower curtain, and under the kitchen sink. I searched for cameras even though I did not know what I was looking for. I found nothing. For a week, nothing happened. At first, I felt relieved. Then the silence began to feel worse than contact would have. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected another message. Every time someone knocked on a neighbor's door, I froze. I started noticing unfamiliar cars parked outside my building. Most of them were probably normal. People came and went all day. Still, I wrote down license plate numbers. I took photographs of anyone who stood near the entrance for too long. One evening, my neighbor stopped me in the hallway. He was an older man named Patrick, who had lived across from me for almost 3 years. We were friendly, but not close. We sometimes collected packages for each other. He smiled when he saw me. "I hear you're going to be famous," he said. I felt cold. "What?" "That film." He said a man had visited earlier that week and asked questions about me for a documentary project. Patrick thought it was exciting. He told the man how long I had lived there, what time I usually left for work, and whether I received many visitors. "Did he give you a name?" I asked. Patrick frowned and tried to remember. He could not. "Did you sign anything?" "Maybe." He laughed. It was just one of those release forms. I asked what else the man wanted to know. Patrick's smile faded. He said the questions had become strange near the end. Had I ever screamed during the night? Had Patrick noticed bad smells coming from my apartment? Did I own a heavy winter coat? Had he ever seen me return home covered in mud? Patrick said no to all of them, at least that was what he told me. After that, things in my apartment began moving. At first, the changes were so small that I doubted myself. A mug sat 2 inches from where I remembered leaving it. A cabinet door was open when I was sure I had closed it. A framed photograph on my shelf faced slightly toward the room instead of straight ahead. Then one morning, the chair beside my window had been turned around. It faced the glass. Someone sitting there would have been able to look down at the street, or someone outside might have been able to look up and see them. I began photographing every room before leaving for work. At night, I compared the apartment to the pictures. Sometimes nothing had changed. Sometimes a lamp had shifted. A book had moved from one side of the table to the other. A blanket had been folded neatly over the couch. It looked less like someone was searching my apartment and more like someone was arranging it, staging it for a shot. I stopped sleeping properly. I would wake at 2 or 3 in the morning, certain I had heard the click of a camera shutter. I hid beneath the covers like a child. I held my breath until my chest hurt, listening for movement in the room. I never saw a camera. That became worse than finding one would have been. The absence felt alive. It became its own kind of animal, moving beneath my skin. I changed the locks. 2 days later, I found my front door standing open when I came home. Nothing was missing. I moved out the following week. I told no one the new address. Not Patrick. Not my coworkers. Not even my mother. I paid the deposit in cash and used a different email address on the lease. I chose a building across town with cameras in the lobby and 2 locked doors between the street and my apartment. For the first few nights, I slept better. The new place was smaller, but I did not care. I checked the locks before bed. Then I checked them again. Sometimes I got up 3 or 4 times during the night to make sure the door was still closed. I brought only a few things from the old apartment. Clothes, books, some kitchen items. The stuffed rabbit I had owned since I was 6. The rabbit was old and faded, with one ear hanging lower than the other. I kept it on a shelf beside my bed. I felt foolish bringing it with me, but leaving it behind felt worse. Almost 3 weeks after the move, I was awake late at night. It was after 1 in the morning. Rain tapped against the windows and the new apartment felt too quiet. I opened a streaming service, looking for something mindless to play in the background. I scrolled through comedies, old dramas, and documentaries. Then a thumbnail stopped my thumb before my brain understood what I was seeing. It was my face. The image had been taken in the coffee shop. I was mid-laugh. My head turned slightly toward Wes. The lighting was poor and made my face look pale. Behind me, the rest of the shop had been darkened. Beneath the picture was a title, Plain Sight, a documentary. The runtime was 1 hour and 33 minutes. Released today. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I touched it again. The page opened. Wes Bennett's name was listed as producer. There was a short description. It called the film a disturbing examination of loneliness, obsession, and the hidden dangers of an ordinary life. My full name appeared in the summary. I pressed play. My hands had already begun to shake. The first 20 minutes showed the coffee shop. Our entire conversation had been filmed. The footage cut between different angles. One camera had been behind me. Another appeared to have been somewhere near the counter. A third angle showed both of us from above. I had not seen any cameras that day. The scene had been edited tightly. Long pauses were removed. Ominous music played beneath our voices. On screen, I looked much more frightened than I remembered feeling. Wes's question sounded different after editing. What had felt polite in person now seemed like an interrogation. His voiceover described me as isolated and unstable. Then the film moved to my old building. Patrick appeared on screen. He stood in the hallway outside my apartment and smiled nervously at the camera. He explained how we had met. He talked about the times we collected packages for each other. Then he said I had changed during the final months. I leaned closer to the screen. Patrick had never told me that. In the film, he said I had started coming home late at night with dirt on my shoes. He said he sometimes heard me talking to someone inside the apartment, even though I lived alone. He said the last time he saw me, I seemed scared. Then came the shot of my front door from inside the apartment. That impossible angle again. The camera moved through my old rooms, my couch, my kitchen, my bed. The apartment looked exactly as it had before I moved. Then the documentary cut to a news report. A reporter stood near the edge of a tree line. It was night. Floodlights burned behind her. Police officers moved through the trees, sweeping flashlights across the ground. Yellow tape stretched between two trunks. The reporter looked into the camera and said my full name. She said I had been missing for 9 days. I paused the documentary. The room became silent. I looked at the date on my phone. I had not been missing. I was sitting in my apartment. I went back and played the scene again. The reporter said my name a second time. She described a search that had never happened. I called my mother. She did not answer. It was after 2 in the morning, so that was not unusual. Still, I called again. Voicemail. When I returned to the documentary, the next scene had already begun. My mother sat at the kitchen table in the house where I had grown up. She looked older than she had the last time I saw her. Her back was straight. Her hands were folded tightly in front of her, as though she were preparing herself for terrible news. She looked directly into the camera. She said how much she missed her daughter. She said she wished she could hear my voice again. I called her a third time while her recorded image continued speaking. No answer. The film returned to the woods. The camera moved slowly through wet leaves. The music had become quiet. A flashlight beam passed over roots, mud, and broken branches. Then it found the stuffed rabbit. It lay half buried beneath brown leaves. One ear was dark with moisture. The camera paused on it. I turned toward the shelf beside my bed. The rabbit was there. I picked it up. The cloth felt dry, real. I held it against my chest and looked back at the screen. In the documentary, the camera moved deeper into the trees, slowly, carefully, almost respectfully. Then it found me. I was lying face down in the dirt. My hair spread around my head in a way that looked wrong. I wore a long, dark coat. I did not own that coat. Not yet. One hand was visible near my face. There was mud beneath the fingernails. The film did not show the body clearly, but it showed enough. I heard myself scream. The sound was high and broken. I shouted at the television that it was not real. I said none of it had happened. I said I was alive. I argued with the screen as though it could hear me. Then the documentary cut to my new apartment, the one I was sitting in. A static camera showed my front door from inside the room. The image was dark, but I could recognize the walls and the small table near the entrance. Heavy breathing filled the soundtrack. It sounded like someone standing too close to a microphone. I looked away from the screen. My front door was open. Not wide, only a few inches. The hallway beyond it was dark. I dropped the rabbit. I ran across the room and slammed the door shut. Then I locked the deadbolt, fastened the chain, and pushed a chair against the handle. I called the police with my back pressed against the wood. They arrived quickly. 2 officers searched the apartment. They checked the closets, windows, fire escape, and bathroom. They examined the door, frame, hinges, and locks. Nothing was broken. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing had been stolen. I told them about the documentary. I said it was still playing on the television. I said the progress bar was moving, and they only needed to look. One officer walked into the living room. The screen was black. The streaming service was not open. They checked the viewing history. Plain Sight did not appear. They searched the title. No results. They searched Wes Bennett's name. His real documentaries appeared, but not the one about me. The officers were kind. That made it worse. They spoke slowly and asked whether I had been sleeping. One asked whether I had taken any medication or drugs. I told them I was not imagining it. They said they believed I had been frightened. That was not the same thing. Before leaving, they suggested I call someone I trusted and avoid staying alone. I did not tell them there was no one who knew where I lived. After they left, I sat on the floor beside the door. The television turned on by itself. The documentary returned. The progress bar showed 5 minutes remaining. That was almost 2 weeks ago. The film has not ended. It does not stop. That is the part I cannot understand. Every time I check, the progress bar still shows 5 minutes remaining. Sometimes the screen is black. Sometimes it shows the woods. Sometimes it shows my apartment from different angles. Yesterday, it showed me sleeping. The footage had been recorded from the corner above my bed. The camera slowly moved closer to my face. I covered the screen with a blanket. The sound continued. At 4 a.m, I heard Wes's voice from beneath the fabric. He said, "The final moments are always the most important." I unplugged the television, kept playing. I carried it into the bathroom and placed it face down in the tub. The documentary continued on my phone. I deleted the streaming app. The film opened in my browser. I turned the phone off. The screen stayed lit. Always 5 minutes remaining. 5 minutes of something that has not happened yet. 5 minutes leading to the woods. Sometimes the film shows the front of my building. Sometimes it shows the dark coat hanging in a shop window. I passed that shop yesterday. The coat was there. The exact coat worn by the body in the documentary. I walked faster. I did not buy it. Tonight, it is hanging beside my front door. I do not know how it arrived. The tag is still attached. My size is printed inside. I called my mother again this morning. A man answered. He sounded like Wes. He said they were almost ready for the final interview. Then the line went dead. I have not been able to reach her since. I sleep with the stuffed rabbit now. Every night I place it on the bed beside me. I check the locks. Then I check the rabbit. Then I check the locks again. Some mornings there are wet leaves on the floor near the bed. I sweep them away. By evening, they are back. The documentary has started showing small changes before they happen. Yesterday, I watched myself knock over a glass of water. 10 minutes later, my hand slipped and the glass fell. This morning, the film showed the bathroom light burning out. It happened at noon. A few hours ago, it showed my front door slowly opening. I pushed a heavy table against it. The door has not moved. Not yet. The runtime bar still shows 5 minutes. I'm recording this because I need my own version to exist somewhere. A version that has not been edited. A version without Wes's music or his voice explaining what I felt. I am still here. I want that written somewhere that is not part of their footage. I am still alive. The rabbit is on my lap. The door is locked. The coat is hanging beside it. The television is showing the tree line again. Floodlights move through the branches. The reporter is speaking, but the sound is too low for me to understand. The camera turns toward the wet leaves. The progress bar has changed. 4 minutes remaining. I am still here. I am still alive. I am still here. My grandmother spent the final 6 weeks of her life in a hospice near the edge of town. The building stood by itself at the end of a quiet road, surrounded by tall trees and fields that had been left empty for years. It did not look like a hospital from the outside. The walls were pale yellow and flower boxes sat beneath the windows. There were wooden benches near the entrance and a small garden where patients could sit with their families when the weather was warm. Inside, however, it still smelled like every medical building I had ever entered. Hand sanitizer, cleaning chemicals, warm plastic, old coffee. Gran had cancer. By the time she entered the hospice, the doctors had stopped speaking about treatment. They talked about comfort instead. They talked about pain control, peace, and making the most of whatever time remained. Everyone understood what those words meant. My mother stayed with her almost every day. I visited after work and spent most weekends there. Gran slept more as the weeks passed, but when she was awake, she was still herself. She complained about the food. She teased the nurses. She asked whether I had finally met someone, even though she already knew the answer. Sometimes she forgot what day it was, but she never forgot me. She had a special way of saying my name. She never used the shorter version everyone else called me. She always said the whole thing slowly, placing more weight on the middle, as though the name were something she had made herself. A week after Gran arrived, a woman named Carol came to speak with us. Carol was probably in her late 50s. She had short gray hair, soft brown eyes, and a voice that made everything she said sound safe. She wore a small badge with the hospice logo, though I do not remember seeing her name printed anywhere on it. She told us about something called the Legacy Program. It's run through a charity, she explained. Volunteers sit with patients and record their memories. Stories, advice, family history, anything they want to leave behind. My mother leaned forward immediately. Carol took out a tablet and showed us the app that came with the program. She said every family received a private account. After the patient passed away, the recording would appear inside the app. You'll always have their voice, she said, one tap away. Then she played us a short testimonial video. A young woman sat on a couch holding her phone. She was laughing and crying at the same time while a recording of her dead father sang "Happy Birthday" through the speaker. The video was clearly designed to make people emotional. it worked. My mother signed the form before Carol had even finished explaining everything. There was no charge. That should have made me suspicious, but it did not. At the time, it seemed like a gift. Carol came back 2 days later with recording equipment. She placed a small microphone on the table beside Gran's bed and set a recorder near the window. What I remember most clearly is that Carol never spoke inside the room. She talked to us in the hallway before entering. She explained how long the recording would take and asked us to leave Gran alone with her for part of it. But the moment she stepped through the door, she became completely silent. She carried a small, dry erase board and a black marker. Whenever she wanted Gran to answer a question, she wrote it on the board and held it up. How are we feeling today? Tell me about your wedding. What was your happiest memory? What would you like your family to remember? At first, I thought Gran might find it strange, but she did not seem bothered. She read each question and answered in her own time. Carol smiled, nodded, and wrote the next question. I assumed she had been trained to work that way. Maybe some patients had trouble hearing. Maybe silence helped keep the recording clean. Maybe it was meant to feel respectful. Whatever the reason, it seemed kind. I did not think about it again. Gran died on a Tuesday morning. My mother and I were both there. The room was quiet except for the sound of the oxygen machine and rain tapping against the window. Gran had been unconscious for most of the night, but shortly before sunrise, she opened her eyes. She looked at my mother first, then she looked at me. She said my full name, softly, slowly, the way only she ever said it. Then she closed her eyes. Her breathing became weaker until it stopped. The nurse entered a few minutes later and turned off the machine. The recording from the Legacy program arrived on Thursday. There was one file in the app, 40 minutes long. The quality was surprisingly clear. Gran told the story of the night my grandfather proposed to her. His car had broken down during heavy rain, and they had been forced to walk almost 2 miles to a gas station. He had planned a beautiful evening, but everything had gone wrong. The restaurant lost their reservation. The flowers had been ruined by the rain. The car died. In the end, he proposed beneath the broken sign of a closed gas station, while they were both soaked through. Gran laughed while telling it. Near the end of her life, her laugh had become wet and rough because of the fluid in her lungs. It was not the laugh I remembered from childhood, but it was still hers. My mother listened to the recording every night before bed. I listened too. For about a month it helped. There is something strange about grief. You know the person is gone, but your mind continues expecting them to return. You reach for your phone to call them. You hear a sound in another room and think it might be them. You see something in a shop and begin wondering whether they would like it, before remembering there is no reason to buy it anymore. The recording filled that empty space for a while. I could hear Gran whenever I wanted. I could close my eyes and pretend she was only in another room, telling one of her stories. Then a second file appeared. The Legacy app was very simple. There were no menus or extra folders. It contained only one page, and that page was meant to contain one recording. That was all. But one morning, when I opened the app, there were 2 files. The second recording had a date beneath it. 4 days after Gran's death. I stared at it for a long time. My first thought was that the date had been entered incorrectly. Maybe Carol had recorded another part of the interview and uploaded it late. Maybe the app had copied the original file and given it the wrong date. I told myself it was a glitch. Then I pressed play. It was Gran's voice. But she was not telling a story. She was saying my name, my full name, the version only she ever used. She repeated it again and again, slowly and softly, almost as though she were testing the sound to see whether it still fit inside her mouth. At first, there was nothing else. Then I noticed something beneath her voice. It was so faint that I had to press the phone against my ear and turn the volume all the way up. Between repetitions of my name, she whispered another sentence. "It's so much louder in here than they told me it would be." My whole body went cold. Then, and I'm ashamed to admit this, it became warm. Because my first thought was not that the recording was impossible. My first thought was that she was not completely gone. She was still somewhere. She was trapped inside something, and she was frightened, and she was trying to reach me. For 1 second, I felt as though I had her back. That was where the warmth came from. I called the number listed in the app. It had been disconnected. I emailed Carol. The message came back almost immediately because the address did not exist. I searched for the charity online and found nothing. Then I drove to the hospice. The woman at the front desk was young. I had seen her during Grand's stay, though I did not know her name. I asked to speak with someone from the Legacy program. She looked at me without answering. Then her whole body became still. "What program?" she asked. I explained it. I mentioned Carol, the recordings, the app, and the form my mother had signed. The woman listened with an expression that became more careful with every word. When I finished, she told me the hospice had never offered any program by that name. I thought she had misunderstood. I showed her the app. She refused to touch my phone. She told me there was no Carol listed among the hospice staff or registered volunteers. I asked her to check again. She said she had already checked. Her voice stayed calm and even, but I could see fear in her eyes. Before I left, I asked whether anyone had entered Grand's room without permission. The woman did not answer. She only said, "You should delete that app." Then she asked me to leave. I tried to find Carol myself. I searched volunteer records, charity lists, social media pages, and old hospice newsletters. Nothing. Eventually, after almost a month, I found another woman who had once volunteered at the hospice. Her name was Marguerite. She had quit the year before. Getting her to meet me was difficult. She ignored my first 3 messages. When she finally responded, she agreed to speak only in a crowded public place during the daytime. We met in a coffee shop on the other side of town. Marguerite was already seated when I arrived. She appeared to be in her 60s. She wore a heavy coat, even though the weather was warm. Her eyes moved constantly around the room, watching the door, the windows, and everyone sitting nearby. I sat across from her and began to explain why I had contacted her. Before I could finish my first sentence, she took out her phone. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. Then she turned it toward me. "Do not say my name out loud. Do not say yours. Not in here." I looked at her. I thought she was being dramatic. I asked out loud why she could not simply speak to me like a normal person. Her face tightened. She erased the message and typed another. "Nothing of your grandmother is in that recording. She is gone. She passed cleanly. It was never her. Not the first recording, not the ones after." I told her she was wrong. I said I knew Grand's voice. I knew the way she laughed. I knew the exact way she said my name. Marguerite shook her head slowly. Then she typed for a long time. "The recording made near the end of a person's life does not capture them. It holds something open. The dying person is only the wedge placed in the door. The voice you hear afterward belongs to what is on the other side. It learns the person closest to it first. It wears your grandmother because it knows you will keep listening. You will keep the door open for her. That is what love is to it. A door you cannot make yourself close." I read the message twice. Then I asked what was on the other side. Marguerite did not answer. She wiped the screen and typed again. We do not speak in the room because it is listening through the opening the entire time. Whatever it hears, it can wear. We give it nothing of our own. First, it wears the one you lost. Then it begins asking for you. I felt the people around us suddenly become too close. The coffee shop was busy. Conversations filled the room. Cups struck tables. Chairs moved across the floor. I asked how far someone had to go before it was safe to speak. Marguerite stared at me, then she typed, "Away from what? The dying only open the door. It does not close after them. Every recording of the dead is another crack it can listen through, and you are all carrying those cracks in your pockets. Count the phones in this room. I quit a year ago. I am still typing." She placed some money on the table. Then she stood and walked away. I tried calling her later that evening. Her number had already stopped working. I never found her again. Strangely, I felt better after speaking with her. I was not calm, but I felt relief. If Marguerite was right, then the voice in the app was only a copy. It was a costume, shaped like my grandmother. Gran herself was gone. Really gone. Safely gone. Somewhere the app could not reach her. Gone is a terrible thing for someone you love to be. It is not the worst thing. I understand that now. I checked the app in the parking lot before starting my car. There were 9 recordings. I should have deleted the app. I should have thrown the phone away. Instead, I listened to every file. I knew I should not. I cannot explain why I did it, except that the voice belonged to someone I loved. And when that happens, stop is no longer a thing your thumb understands how to do. For the first 3 or 4 recordings, it continued sounding like Gran. It repeated the story about the car breaking down in the rain. It said my name. It laughed. Sometimes it asked me questions. It asked whether I remembered sitting with her in the kitchen while she baked bread. It asked whether I missed her. It asked whether I was alone. Around the 5th file, the seams began showing. Gran's voice was still the loudest, but other voices had appeared beneath it. At first, I thought I was hearing an echo. Then I realized they were different people, men and women, children and elderly people, dozens of voices layered together, each slightly out of time with the others. It reminded me of a church congregation saying the Lord's Prayer at different speeds. Everyone beginning together, but slowly separating until the words became a confused wall of sound. Some voices whispered, others cried, a few laughed. No matter how each recording began, they all ended in the same place. Every voice eventually said the same sentence. "It's so much louder in here than they told me it would be." I remember what I thought when I heard that. I thought the thing was describing its own side of the door. I imagined 9 different voices, 9 different costumes, each one copied from someone's dead parent or grandparent. I want that belief back. A week later, I decided to search the files for proof. My mother was still listening to Gran's first recording every night. I wanted to force her to stop. I wanted to find a mistake that proved the voice was false. If I could catch the mimic failing, maybe my mother would believe me. I put on headphones and turned the volume all the way up. Then I listened to each recording, second by second. In file 6, the voice was asking me to say my name. It sounded warm and gentle. "Just once," Gran's voice said. "Say it clearly, so I can learn to speak with you properly." In the middle of the word name, the voice changed. It lasted less than half a second. The warmth vanished like a radio slipping away from its station. Beneath it was another voice, smaller, farther away, but hers, really hers. "Don't." Then the warm voice returned and finished the sentence as though nothing had happened. I sat there until the recording ended. My hands shook so badly that I had to place the phone on the table. Then I went back through every file, at full volume, second by second. Gran was inside all of them. She never managed a full sentence. In file 4, buried beneath the story, I heard the first part of my name. Not the version everyone used. Her version. It ended suddenly, as if a door had closed over the sound. In file 7, beneath a story about a wedding Gran had never attended, I heard one word. Tired. That was all. Just tired. I told myself the mimic could be creating those sounds, too. A false grandmother with a real frightened voice hidden underneath would be a stronger lure than a simple copy. The creature might want me to believe Gran was trapped. That explanation held for about one day. Then I reached file 8. Everything I had heard before could fit Margaret's rule. Whatever the thing heard, it could wear. Gran had told the engagement story at every Thanksgiving dinner for as long as I could remember. She had told it to Carol's recorder, too. Her laugh, her speech, and the way she said my name could all have been recorded. A clever mimic with enough material could copy those things. But file 8 began with a question. Do you remember Mr. Church? I hate writing those words. Mr. Church belonged to us. When I was 9, Gran woke me before sunrise one Sunday morning. She told me to dress quietly and meet her outside. Instead of going to church, we drove to the lake and took my grandfather's rowboat onto the water. Skipping Sunday service was a serious matter in my family. My grandfather was a deacon. Church was not optional. Gran knew that. That was why she made the trip feel like a secret adventure. We rowed out while the sky was still pale. We sat with our fishing lines in the water and whispered so we would not frighten the fish. Then a heron landed on the front of the boat. It stood on the bow, tall and gray, looking down its long beak at us with such a serious expression that it seemed disappointed. Gran stared at it. Then she said, "Well, we came to church after all. Morning, Mr. Church." We laughed so hard that the bird flew away and every fish near us probably disappeared. On the way home, Gran made me promise never to tell my grandfather. I kept that promise. So did she. We never spoke about Mr. Church again. Not at family dinners, not over the phone, not in the hospice. It was not even a story we told each other. It was only a memory. Sometimes, when a church service ran too long, Gran and I would look at each other from across the room, and I would know she was thinking about the heron. But we never said the name aloud. There was no recording of Mr. Church anywhere in the world. The thing could only wear what it heard. Nothing had ever heard about Mr. Church. Only Gran and I had been in that boat. I searched for another answer. Maybe it had been a lucky guess, but it was too exact. The voice described the heron. It described the boat. It described the way the sky looked that morning. It even repeated what Gran had said. There was only one explanation left. It was the explanation Marguerite had been trained never to believe. The thing was not wearing a recording of Gran. It had Gran. It had been searching through her memories the way someone might search through a stolen purse. It found every private moment, every promise, every hidden piece of love. Then it found the softest memory we shared and used it as bait. That warmth I had felt at the beginning had been real. Gran was still there. She was frightened. She was asking me not to leave her alone. I had believed that was the trick. I was wrong about how the trick worked. The warmth was not a lie, the warmth was true. That was what made it useful. File 9 ended differently from the others. The warm voice was asking me for my name again. "Say it once," it said. "Just once, and I can speak with you properly." Then the voice stopped in the middle of a word, hard, sudden, like someone pulling their hands away from a piano. There were 3 seconds of silence, then breathing. After that, Gran spoke, very quietly, very quickly. "Don't answer me." That happened 3 weeks ago. There has not been another complete word from Gran since. At first, I thought the silence might mean she was free. I no longer believe that. I think every word costs her something. The don't, the tired, the broken piece of my name. Each one might be a piece of strength she can never recover. Half a second at a time, she has been spending whatever remains of her and me. The more I thought about the recordings, the more I understood how large the problem had become. My aunt owns a digital memory box that plays messages from her dead husband. My cousin has kept a voicemail from his father for 3 years. My mother listens to Gran every night. Every family has something like that now. Phones are full of dead voices, messages, videos, recordings, birthday songs, final goodbyes. Every one of them might be another crack in the door. My mother called me last night. She was crying, but she sounded happy. She said something wonderful had started happening in her app. A new voice had appeared. It was not Gran. At first, I wondered why the thing would choose another voice. Gran was the person my mother would follow anywhere. Then I understood. Every time the creature used Gran and reached the question, Gran stopped it. The hitch, the whispered, "Don't." The sudden silence in the middle of a word. It could wear Gran's voice, but it could not force her to ask. So it brought in someone who would not fight. My mother described the new voice as a man. Warm, patient, gentle. He spoke slowly and never sounded demanding. He asked her to say her own name into the phone. Only a few times, just so he could learn to speak with her properly. My mother had not done it yet. That man was someone's grandfather. Someone else had been listening for him the way I had listened for Gran. Either he had stopped fighting, or he had been trapped for so long that there was no part of him left that could fight. I do not know which possibility is worse. I drove to my mother's house without calling her back. From the moment she opened the door, I did not say one word aloud. I entered the kitchen, found an old envelope, and began writing on the back of it. Turn the phone off. Do not answer any voice. Do not say your name. Do not speak near the app. My mother began crying. She asked what was wrong with me. I did not answer. I wrote faster. When she tried to speak my name, I covered her mouth with my hand. She became angry and frightened. I hugged her and kept my mouth closed against her shoulder. That was when I finally understood Carol's dry erase board. Give it nothing of your own. Whatever it hears, it can wear. Whoever it takes, it keeps. I left with my mother's phone hidden inside my jacket. She allowed me to take it, which should tell you how frightened I must have looked. I plan to buy her a dry erase board in the morning. I cannot explain any of this to her in a way she will believe. My only evidence is a bird that once stood on a boat, and a secret no one ever spoke aloud. She thinks I am having a breakdown. That is fine. I would rather have her believe I am losing my mind than hear her own voice asking for me through the app. Last night, both phones were sitting on my kitchen table. Mine and my mother's. A new file appeared. I do not know which phone received it first. I do not think it matters anymore. The recordings seem to appear wherever I am. I knew better than to press play. You already know that I did. Stop is not a thing my thumb knows how to do. This recording was different. There was no sweet voice, no warmth, no gentle questions. No one asking for my name. It was only Gran. Her voice was clear as it had been that morning on the lake. She sounded tired in a way I had never heard any living person sound tired. Then she spoke. "Baby, listen to me. Because I don't get long." I froze. There is one way I'm allowed to stop. One, I'm supposed to ask you for your name. That's the whole trade. I ask, you say it out loud, and I get to stop. She took a breath. It asks me every day. Every day I tell it no. Her voice became weaker. "So don't you dare. Whatever you hear from now on, whatever this sounds like next time, don't you dare give it to me." The recording ended. 40 seconds. That was all. I do not know what those 40 seconds cost her. I do not know what she meant by stop. Maybe it means rest. Maybe it means release. Maybe it only means an ending. I have decided not to think too deeply about it. Because if stop means mercy, then every day she refuses is another day she chooses that loud place over my name. She remains there because she is protecting me. It is after 4 in the morning now. Both phones are lying face down on the far side of the room. I am typing this because it keeps my hands where I can see them. There is something I cannot say to my mother. I cannot say it to anyone who loves me. It would be so easy. Gran is inside. It is loud. She is tired. The entire price is one word. My name. Spoken aloud into the phone. She kept every promise she ever made to me. Now she is keeping the final one with everything she has left, every second of every day, in a place I cannot imagine. She is suffering, so I never discover what the thing is buying with my name. The phones made a sound a few minutes ago. Not a notification. A voice, very faint. Both phones were face down, but I heard Gran whispering from one of them. She said she was tired. She asked whether I remembered the boat. Then she said, "Morning, Mr. Church." My hand moved toward the phone before I could stop it. For one moment, all I wanted was to hear her clearly. I wanted to tell her I remembered. I wanted her to know I had never forgotten. Then I remembered the final recording. Whatever you hear from now on. Whatever this sounds like next time. Do not give it to me. I pulled my hand back. The voice changed. It became warmer, sweeter. "Just say your name, baby." I placed both hands on the keyboard. The phone began ringing. The caller ID showed Gran's name. I deleted her contact the day after the funeral. The phone still showed it. The ringing stopped. Then my mother's phone began to ring. My own name appeared on its screen. The thing has heard enough of me to know who I am. But maybe it has not heard enough to wear me properly. Not yet. That is why it needs the name. I can hear breathing coming from both phones now. Behind the breathing are other voices. Men, women, children, all of them whispering at slightly different speeds. Some are asking for names. Some are calling to people who are not here. Some are repeating the same sentence again and again. It's so much louder in here than they told me it would be. Gran's voice is among them. Sometimes I hear her say, "Don't." Sometimes she says, "Tired." Once, only once, she managed to say my full name. The moment I heard it, every light in the apartment went out. The phones began glowing. The screens showed the same image. Dark water, a small rowboat, a gray heron standing on the bow. The image is still there. The thing found Mr. Church inside her memory. Now it is showing him to me. It thinks the secret belongs to it because it stole it from her. It is wrong. The memory belongs to us. So does the promise. Gran made me swear to keep that morning secret. I kept that promise for 30 years. I kept it until I had to write it here, because someone needs to understand what is happening. Maybe writing it was a mistake. Maybe the thing can read too. Maybe every word is another crack. But I have not said my name. Not once. The voices are becoming louder. The whole apartment sounds like a crowded church where everyone is praying in a different language. The phones keep moving across the table, slowly sliding toward me, even though no one is touching them. Gran is crying now. Or something is using the sound of her crying. It says she cannot continue. It says the pain will stop if I help her. It says one word will free her. I want to believe it. That is the danger. It does not need to create a perfect lie. It only needs to offer the truth in the cruelest possible way. She may truly be suffering. She may truly be tired. My name may truly allow her to stop. But she told me not to give it. She knows what happens after the trade. She knows what the thing receives. She knows why my name is worth more than her freedom. And I trust her. The phone is ringing again. Gran's voice is singing the song she used to sing when I was sick. Beneath it, something is scratching from inside the speaker. I have placed a towel over both phones, but the sound continues. The dry erase board I bought for my mother is leaning against the wall. A few minutes ago, words appeared on it. No hand wrote them. Say it once. I wiped them away. They returned. Now the board shows my full name. Every letter is correct. But knowing a name is not the same as hearing it given. That must be the rule. It can steal memories. It can copy voices. It can reach through every recording. But it still needs me to open the door from this side. I will not. Gran swore me to secrecy once in a rowboat. I kept that promise for 30 years. Now she is asking me to keep another one. The phones are screaming. The lights are flashing. The heron on the screens has turned its head and is staring directly at me. Something behind it is rising from the water. I will not look. I will keep typing. I will keep my mouth closed. I can keep this promise. I can keep this one. I can keep this one. Sorry to pause for just a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the calm so far. If you'd like more nights like this, true stories, gentle rain, no interruptions, please subscribe to Lacuna Noir. It really helps me keep creating these peaceful experiences for you. And tap the bell so you're here every time a new story arrives in the dark. Now, back to the story. This happened last night. I have not slept since. My hands will not stop shaking, and every time I try to lie down, I hear the road again. I hear the tires. I hear the soft impacts rising through the floor of the car. I hear the branches bending high above the trees. Typing is the only thing keeping my hands busy, so I am going to write down everything exactly as I remember it. Maybe putting it into words will make it feel less real. Maybe it will prove that I imagined some of it. I was driving home from a poker night at a friend's house. The trip normally took around 40 minutes. It was mostly a 2-lane state road with thick forest on both sides. I had driven that route hundreds of times over the last 6 years. It was late, somewhere around 12:30 in the morning. I had a paper bag of cold drive-through fries sitting on the passenger seat. I had eaten a few when they were fresh, but by then they were cold, soft, and covered in salt. The smell filled the car. The radio was playing quietly. I do not remember what song was on. The road ahead was empty. No headlights behind me. No cars coming from the other direction. Just my headlights cutting through the dark. The first squirrel ran beneath my tires about 10 minutes into the drive. It happened so quickly that I barely saw it. A small shape shot out of the trees on the left side of the road, crossed the edge of my headlights, and disappeared beneath the car. There was a soft impact. Not really a sound, more like a small thump that traveled through the steering wheel and the floor beneath my feet. I winced. "Sorry, buddy," I said. I said it to no one. That is what people do when they hit an animal. You feel bad for a few seconds. You tell yourself there was nothing you could have done. Then you keep driving. Animals run into roads. It happens. The second squirrel came about 3 minutes later. It also came from the left. This time, I saw it clearly. It ran straight across the road and went beneath the front wheel before I could move my foot toward the brake. Another thump. I gripped the steering wheel. "You have got to be kidding me." My voice sounded strange in the empty car. It was shakier than I expected. I lowered my speed and placed both hands firmly on the wheel. I had driven that road for years. Before that night, I had probably hit 2 animals in my entire life. Maybe 3 if I counted a bird that struck my windshield. 2 squirrels in 3 minutes did not feel normal. Still, I tried to explain it. Maybe there was something happening in the forest. A storm coming down from the hills. Flooding. A fire. Something making the animals move. The third squirrel appeared less than 2 minutes later. By then, I was traveling at about 40 miles per hour. I was watching the edge of the road carefully. It did not matter. The animal came out of the trees so fast that it looked as though someone had thrown it. It ran straight toward the driver's side of the car. I took my foot off the gas, but it was too late. The squirrel went beneath the front tire, then the back tire. My heart slammed against my ribs. My hands became cold around the wheel. That was when I had my first clear thought. Something is wrong with tonight. I remember those exact words. Something is wrong with tonight. I continued driving because there was nowhere else to go. There were no houses nearby, no shops, no gas stations. The road ran through miles of state forest, and pulling over in complete darkness felt worse than continuing. I kept searching for normal answers. Maybe chemicals had leaked into a stream. Maybe construction had disturbed a nest. Maybe some predator had moved through the area. Then, I noticed something I had been avoiding. All 3 animals had come from the same direction, from the trees on the left, across the road, toward the darkness on the right. After that, the animals came too quickly to count. 2 squirrels ran across together. Then 3 more. A rabbit, something low and dark that moved too quickly for me to identify. Every one of them came from the left. Every one of them ran toward the right. And none of them seemed to care about my car. Anyone who has driven at night knows how animals usually react to headlights. A squirrel freezes. Then it jumps in one direction, changes its mind, and runs back the other way. A rabbit might stop in the road and stare before escaping into the grass. They panic because they are afraid of the vehicle. These animals were different. They ran in straight lines. They did not hesitate. They did not turn back. They did not even look at the headlights. They went directly beneath my tires as though the car was not there. That was when I understood something else. They were not afraid of me. They were afraid of the left side of the road. I slowed to 25. I moved toward the center line and tried to keep the tires away from the places where the animals were crossing. It did not help. Thump, then another. Thump, thump. Before last night, I would have said hitting an animal was one terrible moment. You hear or feel the impact, and then it is over. It is not over when it keeps happening. Every impact came through the car and into my body. The front tire, then the back tire. Each one landed somewhere inside me. For the first few, I said sorry out loud. Every single time. Sorry, I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry. Somewhere around the 8th animal, I realized I had stopped speaking. That frightened me almost as much as what was happening outside. At 50 miles per hour, hitting something small is mostly a sound. At 25, it is a feeling. You feel the front wheel rise slightly. Then there is a short pause. A second where you know the back wheel is about to reach it. You know what is coming, and there is nothing you can do. Then the second impact arrives. I began lifting my feet from the floor whenever an animal went beneath the car. It was an automatic reaction, like a child pulling their legs onto a couch because they are afraid of something beneath it. The smell of the fries suddenly became unbearable. I cracked the window, hoping the cold air would clear my head. The thumps were not even the worst part. The worst part was the moment before each one. I could see the animal. I could see its speed. I could feel my own speed. My mind would calculate the distance before I could stop it. For 1 or 2 seconds, I knew the animal was going to reach the car no matter what I did. Please do not. Please stop. Please turn around. Then, the impact. Then, the back tire. At first, I tried swerving. One squirrel appeared so close that I turned the wheel sharply to avoid it. The tires left the pavement and struck loose gravel. The car slid toward the ditch. For half a second, the headlights filled with tree trunks. I pulled the wheel back and somehow returned to the road. My breathing came fast and hard. I understood then that if I kept swerving, I would die. I would hit a tree or roll into the ditch, and no one would find me until morning. So I made a decision. I held the wheel straight. I let the animals come. I have been thinking about that decision all night. It was necessary. I know that. But it does not feel the same as hitting an animal by accident. At some point, I chose to stop trying. I kept the car steady while living things ran beneath me. I do not think I will ever forget that feeling. Then a rabbit stopped in the middle of my lane. It was the only animal that froze all night. It stood directly in front of me, caught in the headlights. For half a second, it looked at the car. It looked at me. I moved my foot toward the brake. Then the rabbit started running again. But it did not run back toward the woods. It ran directly beneath the car. It had looked at 2 tons of moving metal and chosen the car. After that, I began noticing something worse. Most of the animals were simply trying to cross the road. They ran from left to right, and I happened to be in their path. But some were not crossing. Some came from the trees at an angle. When I changed speed, they changed direction. I watched one squirrel move its line so it would meet my front tire. It corrected itself. It was aiming for the wheel. They were not all trying to reach the other side. Some of them were trying to get beneath the car. I spent the rest of the night trying not to complete that thought. But I have to write it down. Animals are built to survive. A small animal does not understand many things, but it understands danger. It understands pain. It understands the need to stay alive. If something small, warm, and driven by nothing except survival looks at a car moving at 40 miles per hour and decides the car is the safer option, then it knows something I do not. It knows what is behind it. It knows what being caught would mean. Not all of them were running toward the river. Some looked at the forest. Then they looked at me. And they chose me as the mercy. I was crying by then, not quiet tears, not the kind of crying shown in movies. It was ugly and uncontrolled. I could barely breathe. My hands shook so badly that the wheel moved beneath them. I pulled onto the shoulder, turned on my hazard lights, and switched off the engine. I could not be the thing killing them for 1 more minute. The headlights remained on. The forest stood around me. That was when I noticed the silence. I had grown up near those woods. A forest in July is never quiet. There should have been crickets, frogs, insects, and birds. There should have been sounds in every direction. There was nothing. No wind, no insects, no animals, only the soft clicking of the cooling engine. Then I heard footsteps in the trees on the left. They were footsteps. I am certain of that. Something was walking, not running. One step, a pause, then another. The pauses were too long. Each step sounded heavy, almost like a tree falling, but the sound was soft at the same time. Careful, whatever made those steps was trying not to make too much noise. Then I heard another sound. It came from much higher up, 30 or 40 feet above the ground. A branch bent, then slowly moved back into place. A little farther along the tree line, another branch bent. Then another. The sound moved beside the road. Something was touching the branches high above me, taking hold of them, then letting them go. I did not understand that sound yet. I understand it now. I do not remember opening the car door. One moment I was sitting behind the wheel. The next I was standing in the road. My hazard lights flashed behind me. The forest on the left looked like a solid wall of black. A squirrel came out of the darkness. It ran across my shoe. Not around it, across it. Its tiny body passed over the top of my foot and continued toward the other side of the road. It did not dodge me. It did not look up. That small weight on my shoe shocked me more than anything else had. To the animal, I was not a person. I was not a danger. I was part of the ground. To Rain, that was what forced me back into the car. I started the engine, pulled onto the road, and kept driving. It was the only time I stopped that entire night. After that, the animals became larger. Deer came out of the trees in long, panicked jumps. One struck the front corner of my hood. Its body rolled across the pavement. I thought it was dead. Then it stood. One of its legs bent in the wrong direction. But it continued running on the other three as if the broken leg did not matter. A coyote ran beside a rabbit for almost 100 feet. Neither chased the other. Neither seemed aware of the other. Predator and prey ran together. Whatever followed them had made their normal fear meaningless. At one point, I leaned over the wheel and looked up through the windshield. The narrow strip of sky above the road was filled with birds. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. It was after 1 in the morning. They all flew toward the right. I promised myself I would write everything down, even the parts I did not want to remember. By then, I had stopped braking. I could no longer feel the smaller animals beneath the engine and the shaking of the road. I only noticed the larger ones because the steering wheel jumped in my hands. I looked into the rearview mirror. The red light from my taillights reached only a short distance behind me. The road was covered with shapes. Bodies, some were mine. Some had been there before I arrived. What frightened me most was not the number of them. It was the direction they faced. Every body pointed toward the right side of the road. Even the dead were facing away from the forest. Then the dog appeared. A golden retriever. It wore a red collar. A long leash whipped behind it as it ran out of the trees. I saw the leash clearly, about 6 feet long. I keep beginning to wonder where the other end had been. I forced myself to stop. A mile later, I passed a car on the opposite shoulder. Its hazard lights flashed. The headlights were on. The driver's door stood open. No one was inside. No one stood near it. I did not slow down. I looked straight ahead and kept driving. By then, I could no longer avoid the shape of what was happening. Every living thing was moving left to right. The forest on the left was state land. Miles and miles of trees. The right side led down toward the river valley. The movement had continued beside me for most of the drive. Whatever the animals were escaping was not staying in one location. It was moving. It had direction. It was keeping pace with me. I was about 5 minutes from the edge of the forest when I finally saw it. I looked into the rearview mirror. Something crossed the road behind me. It was far away, near the very edge of the red light from my taillights. I could not see its body clearly. I could not see what it stood on. I saw only the antlers. They entered the red light first. They left it last. The antlers moved from the ditch on the left to the ditch on the right. That road has 2 lanes and wide shoulders. I had driven it my whole life. I understood how large something would need to be for antlers to remain visible across that distance. But those were not normal antlers. They did not sway like branches. Antlers are bone. Bone does not bend. These bent. They had joints. In the red light, they looked less like antlers and more like arms. That is the only word that fits. Long arms growing upward and outward. When the thing reached the trees on the right side of the road, it did not crash through them. The antlers folded inward, one part after another, the way a person pulls in their arms when walking through a narrow doorway. Then it disappeared. The road behind me became empty again. That was when the sound from above the shoulder made sense. The branches 40 feet above the ground had been bending and slowly returning to place. The thing had been holding them, moving them out of its way. 5 minutes later, I reached the end of the forest. Everything changed instantly. The sounds returned. Crickets, frogs, wind moving through grass. A raccoon sat beside someone's trash can near the first house. It froze in my headlights. Then it ran away from the car. I began laughing. I laughed so hard that tears ran down my face again. "That's normal," I said aloud. "That's a normal animal. It was afraid of the car. It ran away from me." That felt like the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I made it home. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a long time. I could not sleep. I opened a map and traced the road. The forest was on the left. The river valley was on the right. Every animal had traveled in the same direction. The valley narrowed as it came down from the hills. Then it opened into town. My town. I lived there. So did everything that had made it across the road. What I cannot stop thinking about is that I never saw the thing catch anything. Not once. All those animals ran in complete terror. Some killed themselves beneath my tires rather than let it reach them. And the thing behind them only walked. It did not rush. It did not chase. It took its time. It gently moved branches out of its path. A hunting animal does not move like that. A thing that is driving a herd moves like that. You do not empty an entire forest because you are hungry. You empty it because you want everything to go somewhere. Every animal on that road moved in one direction, down into the valley, into town. The neighborhood dogs started barking around 3 in the morning. They have not stopped. This morning, I forced myself to go outside and look at the car. There was damage on the hood, dirt and blood along the tires. The fries were still on the passenger seat. Cold, hard, stale, I carried them up the driveway and threw them into the trash. It felt like a normal thing to do, something a person does on an ordinary morning. I wanted badly to be a person having a normal day. Then I noticed the yard. My bird feeder was full. Usually birds emptied half of it before breakfast. Nothing had touched it. There were no birds in the trees, no rabbits in the grass, no movement near the fence. Then I saw the squirrel. It was sitting in the center of my lawn. It was alive. It was not eating. It was not moving. It faced the tree line behind my house. Its body was completely still. It had been sitting there for more than an hour. I watched it through the kitchen window. The dogs continued barking. Every few minutes, the squirrel's ears moved, but it did not turn its head. It only stared toward the trees. I placed my hand against the glass and looked past it. The tree line seemed normal. Sunlight reached the leaves. Nothing moved between the trunks. Then the squirrel lowered itself closer to the ground, not as though it were preparing to run, as though it were trying to become smaller. The dogs stopped barking at the same moment. Every dog in the neighborhood. Silence fell over the street. The squirrel did not move. Neither did I. Then, from somewhere behind the trees, I heard a branch bend, high above the ground, 30 or 40 feet up. It moved slowly. Carefully, then, it eased back into place. A few seconds later, another branch bent. Closer this time. The squirrel finally moved. It did not run away from the trees. It turned and looked directly at my house, at my driveway, at the car parked there. And now I understand why it has been waiting. It was supposed to be a completely normal family dinner. There was my mom, my dad, my younger sister Claire, my baby brother Troy, and me. We were a normal middle-class family, living in southern Manchester during the 1990s. Our home was in the Heatons, in one of those quiet neighborhoods where most of the houses looked similar, and everyone seemed to know what the people next door were doing. I spent my entire childhood in that house. We never moved while I was growing up, and our daily routine rarely changed. Most mornings, Mom woke Claire and me for school. We ate breakfast at the kitchen table, pulled on our coats, and walked to the local school. After classes, we returned home, finished our homework, ate dinner, and went to bed. Nothing about our lives was exciting. We did not go out as a family very often. Sometimes we visited a shopping center or went to the piers. On those days, we were allowed to eat fried food, fast food, or whatever street food we could convince our parents to buy. Most of the time, Mom decided it would be cheaper and healthier to cook at home. Claire and I always complained when she said that, although her cooking was never bad. One cold evening in February, Dad came through the front door with a huge smile across his face. He did not even stop to remove his coat properly. He hurried into the kitchen, where Mom was preparing dinner. Troy sat in his high chair nearby, trying to push a colored wooden block into his mouth, even though it was far too large. "We won," Dad announced. "We won the free dinner." Mom stopped stirring the pot on the stove. "Oh my God, how is that possible?" Dad shrugged and laughed as he pulled an envelope from inside his jacket. "I don't know. I called them earlier, and they asked me a lot of questions about what we like to eat. They wanted to know about allergies, too, but I told them none of us had any." He pushed the envelope into Mom's hands. She opened it immediately. "This is wonderful," she said. Orago's is supposed to be extremely exclusive. Those women at the Revlon counter are always talking about how it takes months to get a reservation. I sat at the dining table working on my homework, but I was listening to every word. I had heard the name Orago's before. Even as a child, I knew it was one of those restaurants ordinary families did not usually enter. It was expensive, elegant, and popular with wealthy people. Mom read farther down the page. Her smile faded for a moment. "Oh, the dinner isn't until April." Dad looked disappointed, but only briefly. "That's fine. At least we have something to look forward to." Mom forced the smile back onto her face, placed the envelope safely on top of the refrigerator, and returned to cooking. I forgot about the whole conversation within a few days. To a child, April felt impossibly far away. When the date finally came, I returned home from school with mud on my shoes, dirt on my knees, and my hair sticking in every direction. I had stayed late playing football with some boys from school. Mom was not pleased. "Alan, Look at the state of you, she said the moment I stepped through the door. You knew we were going out tonight. I forgot. You forget everything. Go upstairs and take a bath. Now, I began walking toward the stairs. And wear the clothes I put on your bed, she called after me. The outfit looked new, although it may simply have been something I had avoided wearing before. There was a white shirt, a dark vest, trousers, and a coat. Vests were not my style, even at that age. I felt uncomfortable the moment I put it on. The house became a place of complete confusion for the next hour. Mom was trying to get ready while also dressing Troy. Dad could not find his good shoes. Claire was crying because she hated the emerald green dress Mom had chosen for her. Everyone was shouting from one room to another. Somehow, we eventually made it into Dad's car. Troy sat in his car seat wearing a tiny suit. He looked happier than the rest of us combined. As we drove towards Spinningfields, I pressed my face near the window and watched the city pass. We had traveled through that area before, but usually only on our way somewhere else. That evening, it felt different because we were actually going into the center of it. The building seemed taller than I remembered. Glass windows reflected the evening lights, and people in expensive clothes moved along the pavements. You two had better behave when we arrive, Mom warned from the front seat. Claire sank lower in her seat. Tell that to Alan. I only fight back when you start it, I replied. Mom turned around and gave us both a warning look. No fighting, no shouting, no touching things you should not touch. This is a special evening. Claire folded her arms. I looked back out the window. Dad eventually turned into a wide driveway that looked more like the entrance to a private garden than a restaurant. Men wearing dark blue velvet uniforms waited near a large golden revolving door. The building had tall glass windows, polished stone walls, and small lights hidden among carefully shaped bushes. One of the uniformed men opened our doors. Dad gave him the car keys and received a ticket in return. Another member of staff led us through the building and toward a private lift. When we reached the restaurant entrance, Claire and I stopped walking. A huge aquarium covered most of one wall. Strange silver fish moved through bright blue water. Beside it, the name of the restaurant glowed in gold letters. Oragos. A man in a black suit stood behind a small desk. Dad showed him the letter. The man looked at it, then at each member of our family. His gaze stayed on Troy slightly longer than the rest of us. Of course, he said. Your table is ready. A waitress came forward and guided us inside. I had never seen a restaurant like it. Claire had not either. The places we normally ate had bright red and yellow walls, plastic chairs, paper cups, and bottles of ketchup on every table. Oragos was dark, quiet, and carefully arranged. Soft lights hung from the ceiling. Water moved down a glass wall near the entrance. Every table was covered with thick white cloth, and each place had several forks, knives, spoons, and glasses. The other customers wore suits, jewelry, and dresses that probably cost more than everything I owned. The waitress led us deeper into the restaurant. Our table was in a darker, private area separated from the others by a Japanese folding screen. A round table stood in the center. There were 5 ordinary chairs and 1 high chair for Troy. The tablecloth had so many layers that the fabric hung in soft folds almost to the floor. I rushed toward the chair nearest the window. From there, I could see much of Manchester city center glowing below us. Claire became angry because she had wanted the window seat, but there was nothing she could do. First come, first served. Those were the rules. Please make yourselves comfortable, the waitress said. I will return shortly with refreshments and your food cards. Mom and Dad sat beside each other. Claire sat next to me. Troy's high chair was placed beside Mom. As soon as the waitress disappeared, Mum opened her handbag and pulled out a digital camera. She began photographing everything. The aquarium, the table, the view, each one of us. Meredith is going to be furious when she sees these, Mum said, laughing behind the camera. Dad did not respond. He was looking around the table and quietly counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mum lowered the camera. What are you doing? There are 5 chairs. Yes, Richard, there are 5 of us. No, there are 4 normal seats for us, plus Troy's high chair. I told him he needed one. Mum looked at the table again. I did too. Dad was right. There was Mum's chair, Dad's chair, Claire's chair, my chair, and 1 empty chair. Troy had his high chair. There were 6 places altogether. Well, Mum said, the table was probably designed for 5 adults. They just added the high chair. Dad seemed unsure, but he nodded. The waitress returned with a cart filled with drinks, glasses, and menus. She asked Claire and me what we wanted. I chose Coke. Claire asked for sparkling apple juice. The waitress poured orange juice into a small plastic cup for Troye. Then she turned toward our parents. Would you prefer red or white wine? We'll have the red, Dad answered. Mum nodded. The waitress began explaining the wine. She talked about where it had been made, how old it was, and what flavors they should expect. Claire looked completely lost. When the cork suddenly came free from the bottle, she jumped. That's scary, she said. I don't think I like wine, Dad smiled. More for me and Troye, then. Claire made a disgusted face. The waitress placed 3 wine glasses on the table. She filled Mum's first, then Dad's. Then she filled the glass beside the empty chair. Mum and Dad both paused. Neither of them lifted their drinks. Excuse me, Mum said with a nervous laugh. Who is that one for? The waitress turned toward her. Her polite smile did not change. Your guest, of course. Then she pushed the cart away. Mum and Dad stared at the 3rd glass. I'll drink it, Mum said, reaching across the table. Dad caught her wrist. No, just leave it. It will only go to waste. Leave it. The tension lasted only a few seconds. Claire had already become interested in the menu. She read the strange names aloud and laughed at the descriptions. Troy quietly drank from his bottle. I looked at him. Then I looked beneath his high chair. The plastic cup of orange juice lay on its side under the table. It was empty. Claire, I whispered, grabbing her arm. She pulled away. What? Did you put the orange juice in his bottle? What are you talking about? She looked toward Troy. The baby bottle in his hands was filled with orange juice. Claire and I both stared. Mum followed our gaze. What did you 2 do? She asked. It wasn't me, we said together. Who poured this into his bottle? I didn't, Claire insisted. Neither did I. Mum took the bottle from Troy. He immediately began crying. What on earth were you thinking? We didn't do it. The quiet family dinner quickly became loud. Mum was scolding us. Troy was screaming. Claire and I were defending ourselves. Dad picked up Mum's wine glass and drank from it. People at the other tables started looking over. Enough, Mum snapped. Claire and I became silent. Mum lifted Troy from his high chair and held him against her shoulder. He continued crying. She walked slowly around the table, whispering to him. Please be quiet, sweetheart. We don't want them to ask us to leave. I noticed the other customers watching us. Some whispered to the people beside them. Others turned toward empty chairs at their own tables. That was when I realized something strange. Every table had 1 empty chair. Not a chair that had been pushed away or forgotten. Each empty place was properly prepared. Plate, silverware, glasses, napkin. Every table in the restaurant had 1 place waiting for someone who was not there. Troy suddenly stopped crying. Mum had moved near the empty chair at our table. The baby turned his head toward it. He smiled. Then he began laughing and reaching out with both hands. Mum was too relieved by the silence to notice. She returned him to his high chair. Troy continued staring at the empty seat. He clapped and kicked his feet happily. Mum sat down and reached for her wine. The glass was empty. "You drank all of it?" she asked Dad. He looked at the glass. "There's another one there." He pointed toward the drink beside the empty chair. Then he stopped. That glass was empty too. Mum looked at him. "You drank that one as well?" "No, Richard, I didn't." His voice had changed. He stared at the empty glass as if he did not understand what he was seeing. "I swear I didn't drink it." Mum sighed. "You had better hope the waitress brings the bottle back." The waitress returned a few minutes later. She did not bring the wine. Instead, she pushed a cart carrying a small bonsai tree. The tree was placed in the center of our table. Small, clear pockets hung from its branches, each one containing a tiny piece of food. The waitress explained how to eat them, then walked away. I chose one and placed it into my mouth. The outside felt like a thin layer of soft plastic. It burst between my teeth, releasing a mixture of sweet, salty, and floral flavors. I had no idea what I was eating, but it tasted good. Claire said hers tasted like lavender and mint. "So it tastes like soap?" I asked. "You're eating little bags of laundry soap?" She shoved my shoulder. I tried not to laugh. More appetizers arrived after that. Each dish looked stranger than the one before. One appeared to be a peeled onion arranged like a long white worm and covered in oil and breadcrumbs. Another was called a deconstructed burger. Every part of a normal burger had been turned into a small ball and placed on a stick. The food looked like something from a science laboratory. But every time I tasted one, it somehow reminded me of something ordinary. Then they brought a dish called the nugget. Even now, I feel sick remembering it. A barely developed duck embryo rested inside thin, crispy strips shaped like a bird's nest. The body lay on a piece of toasted wonton. Its head had not fully separated from the rest of it. Its eyes were completely black. Claire stared at it, her eyes filled with tears. "I can't eat that," she whispered. Dad looked at her. "You should try new things. You can't know whether you like something until you taste it." "Dad, don't eat it." He picked up one of the nests and placed the entire thing into his mouth. Claire covered her eyes. Mum looked uncomfortable. "Richard, perhaps we should send this one back. It doesn't look very appetizing." "Nonsense. It's fine." Dad ate another, then another. There were 8 small nests on the plate. He finished all of them. The 3 of us watched in silence. Dad ate quickly, hardly chewing. When the plate was empty, he picked up his water and drank the whole glass in one breath. Troy seemed unaware of what was happening. He remained focused on the empty seat across from him. The unused plate and silverware were perfectly arranged. Ready, waiting, Troy laughed again. The waitress returned and collected the dishes. Then she placed 6 main courses on the table. Claire and I relaxed when we saw that most of the food looked normal. Mum received what appeared to be chicken Alfredo. Claire had lasagna. Troy was given a bowl of warm mushroom soup. My plate held spaghetti with a meatball almost the size of my palm. Dad had steak with mashed potatoes and gravy. The 6th plate was placed between Dad and me. Dad's steak was extremely red. Mum leaned toward it. "Richard, that is far too undercooked. We should send it back." Before she could call the waitress, Dad cut into the meat. Red liquid spread across the plate. It was too thin to look like blood, but too dark to be water. Dad placed the piece into his mouth. He smiled. He continued eating. Each slice released more red liquid. Some of it began gathering around the edges of his lips. Mum shifted her chair slightly away from him. "Go on," Dad said to us. "Your food will get cold." Claire began eating while helping Troy with his soup. Mum quietly worked on her own meal. I tried to eat the spaghetti, but I could barely taste it. My attention kept returning to the sixth dish. Steam rose from the plate. The food looked like a large pouch made from pale, almost transparent flesh. It rested in a pool of orange sauce. I stared at it. A straight seam appeared along the surface. The pouch slowly opened by itself. Small intestines slid out. They collected on the plate in a thick, cream-colored liquid. I almost dropped my fork. I quickly picked up the food card and looked through the main courses. The sixth dish was called the Babe. The description said it contained the intestines of a milk-fed baby goat, cooked in mushroom sauce and wrapped inside the stomach of the mother goat. "Mum," I whispered. She did not hear me. I tried to speak louder, but the meatball slipped from my fork. It fell onto the floor with a wet slap and rolled beneath the table. I suddenly felt someone staring at me. Dad's eyes were fixed on my face. There was nothing in them. His mouth opened. His teeth were covered in red liquid. Dad had always cared about cleanliness. He made Claire and me brush our teeth carefully every morning and night. Seeing his once white teeth covered in dark red made him look like someone else. "Put it back on your plate," he said. "It's rude to make a mess." I looked down. The tablecloth reached almost to the floor. I did not want to go beneath it. But Dad continued staring. Slowly, I left my chair and lowered myself onto my knees. I lifted the layers of fabric. The darkness beneath the table was almost complete. I could see the legs of chairs and shoes around the edges, but the center was completely black. I squinted, searching for the meatball. Then I found it. It was directly in front of my face. Someone was holding it. An old hand stretched from the darkness. The skin was pale and gray. The fingers were thin. The nails were long, dull, and dirty. The hand held the wet meatball toward me. My throat closed. I could not breathe. I wanted to move away, but my body would not respond. Without deciding to do it, I opened my own hand. The gray fingers placed the meatball into my palm. The flesh landed with a wet weight. I stared into the darkness behind the hand. For a few seconds, I thought I could see the outline of something large. Then it moved. The tablecloth shifted on the other side, allowing a thin line of light to enter. I saw Troy's feet hanging from his high chair. One shoe had fallen off. His bare foot moved closer and closer to the darkness. The harness around his body was the only thing keeping him in the chair. Something beneath the table was pulling him. I dropped the meatball. I rushed out from under the cloth, nearly knocking over my chair. I ran to Troy, released the harness, and pulled him into my arms. He began screaming. "There's something under the table," I shouted. "We have to leave." Mum stared at me. "What are you talking about? Alan, sit down." "No, we need to go now." Dad did not react. He remained in his chair, slowly chewing the raw meat. Claire stood and moved beside me. She touched Troy's back, trying to calm him. Mum got up, confused and embarrassed. Everyone needs to calm down. The table began shaking. At first, it was a small movement. Then the entire table jumped violently. Glasses fell over. Plates slid toward the edge. Food dropped onto the floor. The bonsai tree rolled onto its side. The empty chair remained perfectly still. Dad remained seated. His body did not move even while everything around him shook. Mum backed against the wall, holding her handbag tightly. The waitress returned. She looked at the moving table and released a tired sigh. "I'm afraid I must ask you to leave," she said. We have received complaints about the noise from your table. She did not seem surprised by anything happening. I rushed past her with Troye in my arms. Claire followed. Mum grabbed Dad and pulled him from his chair. He resisted for a second, then allowed her to lead him away. We hurried through the restaurant. The other diners watched us. The empty chairs at their tables seemed to turn slightly as we passed. We reached the lift. As the doors began closing, I saw the waitress and the man from the entrance standing beneath the glowing Arago sign. They watched us without expression. Then, the lift doors shut. Claire tried to speak. What was, she could not finish. None of us understood what had happened. In the lobby, Mum demanded to use the telephone. She called my grandfather and asked him to collect us. Dad sat on a couch, staring at the floor. He smelled strongly of wine and raw meat. Granddad arrived by taxi a short time later. Mum explained that Dad had drunk too much and could not drive. Granddad became angry. He told Dad he had been irresponsible, especially with children in the car. Dad did not defend himself. He did not even appear to hear. Mum removed the valet ticket from his jacket and gave it to Granddad. When the car arrived, Dad was placed in the back seat. Mum sat beside Granddad in the front. Claire, Troy, and I took our usual places. Claire fell asleep quickly. Troy slept beside me. One of his feet was bare because we had left his shoe beneath the restaurant table. Mum quietly told Granddad what had happened. He listened, but did not say much. I rested my head gently against Troy and watched his chest rise and fall. I was grateful he was safe. I tried not to think about the hand beneath the table. I tried not to imagine what would have happened if the harness had opened. Even after we left, I could still feel someone watching me. The pressure remained on the back of my neck. It felt as though invisible eyes followed our car all the way home. Our family was never the same after that dinner. Dad began drinking heavily. At first, he only had a glass of wine after work. Then it became 3 glasses. Then a whole bottle. Sometimes he came home already drunk. Other nights, he sat alone at the dining table with an empty chair beside him and poured 2 glasses of wine. One for himself. One for the empty place. Mum and Dad stopped greeting each other with kisses. They argued constantly. Sometimes Mum slept in Claire's room. The happiness slowly left our house. No one mentioned Aragos. Not once. It was as though we had all silently agreed that speaking about it would make something worse. Dad's health began failing after years of drinking. By the time I finished university, Mum and Dad were separated in every way that mattered, although the divorce papers came later. Mum took Claire and Troy to live with Granddad. I eventually moved to London for work. Dad died alone from alcohol poisoning. They found him sitting at his dining table. There were 2 wine glasses in front of him. Both were empty. Years have passed since that night. Mum, Claire, and Troy still live near Manchester. Troy does not remember the restaurant. Claire remembers pieces of it, though she refuses to discuss them. Sometimes I convince myself I imagined what happened beneath the table. I was a child. The restaurant was dark. I was already frightened by the strange food and Dad's behavior. Perhaps the meatball rolled near someone's hand. Perhaps Troy was simply slipping from the high chair. Perhaps the shaking table was caused by Dad moving his legs. But I know what I saw. I remember the gray skin, the long nails, the way the hand carefully placed the meat into mine. I remember something in the darkness pulling my brother closer. Even now, I still look beneath tables. Restaurants, offices, hotels, friends' homes. It does not matter where I am. Whenever I see an empty chair with a plate prepared in front of it, I find myself wondering whether the place is really empty. Sometimes a glass appears slightly lower than I remember. Sometimes a fork moves when no one is near it. Sometimes a child at another table smiles toward a vacant seat and begins laughing. I no longer believe empty chairs are always unoccupied. Perhaps some guests are simply waiting beneath the table until it is time to eat. Look, if you're still watching, you already know what this channel is. No jump scares, no fake drama, just real stories about real people who survive things most of us can't even imagine. And that's scarier than any movie could ever be. If you want more of this raw, unfiltered truth, told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe to Lacuna Noir. We're not here to waste your time. We're here to tell the stories that actually matter. Thanks for listening. Now go get some sleep, if you can.